Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and this is a Swiss MG51. If you ever wondered what would happen if the Swiss took a German cheap-to-manufacture stamped MG42 and made it themselves, what would it be? It would be this, where they replace all the stamped parts with milled parts. These are fantastic guns. So, starting in 1942, the Swiss began looking for a replacement for the two guns that they currently had in military service. They had the LMG25 and they had the MG11. The MG11 was a Maxim heavy machine gun, water-cooled. The LMG25, as the name implies, was a light machine gun on a bipod, also had a tripod mount. But they wanted to, essentially, they saw what the Germans were doing with the MG34, having, well, this was the beginning of the concept of the universal or general purpose machine gun, where you have one gun that can be fitted onto a heavy mount like this and used in a sustained fire, long range, accurate role, or it can be taken off the mount, deployed on a bipod by a two-man team and used as essentially a mobile light machine gun. The Swiss wanted to copy that, but it would take them about 9 years to come up with a final design. So the state arsenal, Waffenfabrik Bern, was involved in this. The SIG company was involved in this, and Hispano-Suiza also actually contributed designs for the competition to design the new machine gun. Now, Hispano-Suiza introduced basically scaled-down copies of some of their existing cannons, automatic cannons, the HS-804 and HS-830. We'll cover those in separate videos another day. Both SIG and W+F Bern decided to start with the MG42 and modify it, adapt it, change the design in various ways. So they both started at the same place, but then they went in different directions. In fact, actually, at one point, the Swiss War Material Authority actually converted a stock MG42 to the Swiss GP11, the 7.5 by 55 millimeter cartridge, and seriously considered, after the end of the war, seriously considered purchasing MG42s from Czechoslovakia and just converting them straight up to 7.5. But they didn't end up doing that. They ended up adopting a gun from Waffenfabrik Bern. Now, over the course of the development of this, there was a MG44, a 46. The 48 is the one that was finally derived, updated a little bit, improved, became adopted as the MG51 in 1951. But in the course of this development, they experimented with roller-delayed guns, roller-locked guns, and flapper-locked guns. Now, of course, the original MG42 is a roller-locked gun, and the World War II iteration of the MG42 is a somewhat flawed gun. It suffers from potential out-of-battery discharges from bolt bounce, and it wouldn't be until the very end of the war that the Germans develop a good system to modify the gun to prevent this, and that's a key component in the MG3 production after the war. The MG3s incorporate a number of modifications to improve the safety and the reliability of the MG42. The Swiss, working on this starting during the war, didn't have access to that. So they were looking at ways to solve some of those problems on their own. And ultimately what they end up adopting here is a flapper-locked derivation of the MG42. Frankly, I think that's a pretty good way to go between those three options. The roller-delayed guns would be a bit simpler, but would be very high rate of fire guns. In German experimentation, the roller-delayed version was the MG45, and it was up at something like 1,800 rounds a minute, which is way too high. In fact, the Swiss specified that they wanted a 1,000 round per minute rate of fire, which is high, but not excessive. So having a fully locked gun is definitely the better way to do it. And then the flapper locking system offers a number of advantages over roller locking. It's a little more expensive. Rollers are very economical and easy to produce at a high quality, but the roller systems have a tendency, as they start to wear, they start to change headspace, where a flapper locked gun is more resilient in terms of that sort of headspace and long-term wear. And if the Swiss wanted anything, it was a long-term, durable, utterly durable gun. So let's go ahead and take this apart, and let's take a look at how they did this and what the differences are between the Swiss MG51 and the German MG42. All right, a little bit about operation of the tripod. We have our elevation controls right here. This is an elevation lock, so I push that forward and it will unlock the gun and allow me to pivot it up and down. It's just a friction lock, so I pull that back and it'll lock in place. Over on this side, we have our elevation adjustment knob right there. And then on top, we have the traverse lock. So if I pull that in, I can pivot the gun side to side. These are my traverse stops, and these are really funky. This is a little different than what I've ever seen around before. So I can lock the traverse in position. Then I have these dials right here, and there's a little peg coming off the side of the top of the mount. If I pull this out, I can then rotate it around. I believe this is a number of mils of adjustment that I want to have to this side of the current aiming point. So let's go with 20. I lock it in place, and now there's a hole going that direction inside this cylinder that allows this peg to travel just far enough inside that cylinder to give me 20 mils of adjustment. I'll pull that out. If I want a lot less, I can go to 5 and have just a little bit of movement. I can then do the same thing over on the other side. So if I set these both to 25, I have that much windage adjustment built in. And then if I want to change my sector of fire, I can unlock the whole thing, pivot the gun to a different position, lock it, and I've got that limited windage again. And if I don't want to use this at all, the best thing to do is set these to 0 to lock them in place, and then you just unlock the windage lock and the gun can move freely. We, of course, have an optics rail on the tripod mount and a 2.3 power magnification scope with this so Swiss here. This elevation BDC cam is actually controlled by rotating the eyepiece here. So you can see this arrow is pointing at a range, and what's happening is I am pulling this sleeve back or forward, which moves this pin in this curved track that is curved specifically to match the ballistic drop of the 7.5 cartridge. So as this goes down, I'm very slightly changing the angle of the scope, and that's how you get from a point blank 0 out to, crank it all the way around, a 2,000 meter BDC cam built into the scope. And of course it goes without saying that there's also a bubble level on the back so that you can make sure the gun is set up level. All right, we are going to go ahead and disassemble this on the tripod because that actually makes it a lot easier to hold in place. We'll take a quick start with the markings on the top cover. We have Waffenfabrik Bern and the Swiss crest and a serial number. That's it, pretty basic markings on the gun. And actually, at some point in Swiss service, they put a sticker on this to remind you to wear ear protection when you're shooting it, which hopefully doesn't need much reminding. Basic function of the gun is exactly the same as the MG42. By the way, this weighs in at 35 pounds for the gun and another 22 pounds for the tripod. So that's 16 kilos for the gun and another 10 kilos for the mount. The charging handle on the 51 has this cam lug on it, so you get a little bit of extra leverage to overcome the initial unlocking of the bolt. That loud click you hear is the release of the accelerator cam. That's something that the original MG42 doesn't have, which we'll take a look at in a moment. Pull that back, it locks the bolt open, and then this is spring-loaded so that it automatically snaps back into place. It's a non-reciprocating charging handle, and that automatic return is a nice added feature that the MG42 also doesn't have. The top cover opens with, just push that in, spring-loaded so it stays in the upward position. One other really cool feature about this that the MG42 doesn't have is that the cam track in the top cover here is curved and then recurved. So the benefit of this is it means you can actually close the top cover whether the bolt is open or closed. In the 42, you have a curve here and then a straight track. And so this track does not line up with the roller cam on the bolt unless it's in, I believe it's the open position. Now, the way they solved this on a lot of other MG42 based guns was to actually put a spring inside the roller bearing here so that it could compress downward if you were trying to close the top cover in the wrong position. What the Swiss did instead is reshape the cam track so that it lines up with the roller cam in both the rearward and the forward positions. So it'll close there. And it'll also close right there. To remove the barrel, we have the same basic mechanism as the 42. We lock the bolt open and then push forward on this lug. that cams the barrel out of the action, and we can pull it out. This barrel is ludicrously heavy. These were intended to fire, like in basic proof testing, they dumped 800 round belts through these things. Like stupidly heavy. This is a very Swiss sort of version, take on the MG42. Now for the rest of disassembly, I'm going to go ahead and close the bolt, and then I have to open the top cover. This lug on the top cover actually prevents you from taking off the buttstock. Once that's up, there's a catch under here. I can pull that back and let out the buttstock. There's that locking catch. This is one of the later pattern examples that has a rubber, it's like a Sturmgewehr 57 style of buttstock on it. Early ones had wooden buttstocks. Then I can pull out the recoil spring. And then I can pull out the bolt. All right, now looking more closely at the bolt assembly here, we have a bolt head. We can take this apart a bit farther by punching out this pin. The pin is the roller cam at the back. There we go. That comes out, and then that is my plunger ejector. So when this is in place, it's the ejector right there in the front of the bolt face. And then under it is the firing pin. With those two out, I can rotate the bolt head and take it out. So there are our two locking flaps. Now there is, to disassemble this further, what you would do is pull the extractor spring back here. There's a tool that allows you to pull it back but not have the extractor fly out of the gun, and then you can lift the locking flaps out, but I think you get the idea here. When the bolt is locked, these lock into matching recesses in the barrel. So there they are on one side, and there they are on the other. And they go together just like that. So unlocked, they go in, they spread apart, and that locks the bolt in place. They're moving like this at high speed, and when they close, the bolt carrier, the bolt is going to hit the breech face, the bolt carrier is going to hit this, and just because there is a little bit of elasticity in the metal, this tends to bounce backwards and pull the bolt back. And without the right locking mechanism, that can cause the gun to come partially out of battery when it's actually firing. And this was a significant issue on roller locked guns because the roller lock pretty quickly, like immediately, turns into roller delayed and opens a little too easily. Now, locking flaps give you a little bit more leeway where this can travel just a tiny bit but remain fully locked. More importantly, the Swiss added this lever on the bottom of the gun, and this is an inertial, basically a bolt bounce lock. So when this goes forward, the bolt's going to hit and stop, and this lug, this moving piece right here, is going to also bounce forward. It pushes this rotating cam forward, and that locks the bolt in position solidly. So that little cam there is pivoting up into this cutout in the bolt and holds it securely in position. So that's how the Swiss eliminated bolt bounce. This is more resilient against change in headspace with the flaps. So a series of really good, I think, design changes. At the same time, the Swiss also changed the manufacturing methods for the gun. The back half of the receiver is all milled from a block. This is kind of crazy. That's part of why this is heavier than a 42. We have the midsection up here that you can see has been cast and then welded onto the milled rear section. And then we do have this front piece of just barrel jacket that I guess they conceded, grudgingly probably, to make out of stamped metal, but it's pretty darn heavy gauge stuff. So they stamped or folded this and then welded it onto the rest of the receiver as well. We can go ahead and also actually take off a couple of the other elements here. So we have the muzzle booster with its internal, or the muzzle flash hider with its internal booster. This helps generate additional back pressure to push the bolt backward. we can actually take off the bipod. Well, okay, that's extremely tight, but you can see this unclamps, and then the bipod can come off the gun if you're using it in a fortress, for example, and you don't need the bipod. You can take it off. All right, and we can also take off the pistol grip here. I just punched that pin through, pin comes out, and this slides back and off. There's no semi-auto setting on here. We just have a crossbolt safety for fire and safe. All right, and there is the MG51 field stripped. If I didn't say clearly at the beginning, this was chambered for the Swiss GP11 75 by 55 millimeter cartridge. It did not use MG11 belts. It did because the MG11 is a pull-out style of belt. This being a MG42 derived gun, it uses a push-through style belt, very similar to NATO belts. In fact, there is an example of the belt. These were non-disintegrating segments of belt. This is the starter tab. The MG51, of course, entered service in 1951. I wasn't able to find any really good numbers on exactly how many were made or what the production time frame was, but there were a couple modifications or alternate versions that were also made. In 1970, 1981, and 1987, there were different versions that were type classified for vehicular use. So in addition to being an infantry gun, and of course this is Switzerland, so it's also being used as a fortification gun, it was also mounted in vehicles as a coaxial or auxiliary weapon in armored vehicles. So you have those versions. The gun is still in service today in fortifications. In 2005, the Swiss adopted the LMG05, which is the FN Mini-Me, and that replaced the MG51 as sort of the mobile, squad level unit machine gun. So still in service, but the front line, like the infantry that are attacking with machine guns, are going to be doing so with Mini-Me's today in the Swiss Army. So I'd like to give a big thanks to the fine anonymous Swiss gentleman who provided this for me to film and show to you guys. And also a big thanks to Marcus for helping me work out everything on this gun to show you. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.